Hello watch enthusiasts. Now today, following a number of emails surrounding this point, I'd like to talk about some of the most beautifully finished dials at different price points. And of course dials being the defining feature in terms of the price of a great deal of the higher end luxury pieces, or at least vintage pieces at auction, it is important to talk about dials. And I haven't addressed this point before, so I would like to talk more in depth about various dials which I think are particularly beautiful at their respective price point. Of course, I would very much be lying if I said that I wasn't somewhat prompted by the video earlier in the week surrounding the various new releases, including those wonderful new dials from Jaeger-LeCoultre. But in terms of dials at a lower end price point, I would say Longines makes some of the most spectacularly finished dials in the business. Therefore, the first watch which I'd like to talk about is the Longines Conquest Heritage and its fantastically finished dial. Now, Longines are often talked about for not offering many different finishes to their cases, notably a lot of their cases are simply polished. And I appreciate why this would cause a certain degree of irritation, I think, around collectors, because of course Longines have such a rich history and more advanced case finishing would be appealing. However, the dial on this watch is superbly finished, with a wonderful sunburst effect and very, very defined indices. Now, as a base for this dial, we have a slightly domed dial, with a very, very elegant sunbursting in this off-white colour, which is closer to pearl, I think, than cream, and gives the watch a fantastic look in the light, while also remaining quite subdued and quite elegant in more formal occasions. Of course, this is built on with the use of applied indices, and in fact the indices are faceted very, very carefully and then polished to give a very robust and advanced look, while retaining an old-fashioned air, which is only augmented by that heavily domed acrylic crystal. Along with these indices, the logo is also applied, which is a very attractive feature and is very nicely engraved out of a matching gold, I suspect gold-plated piece at this price point. We also have the date placed at 12 o'clock, which is, I think, a cunning thought from Longines, which means that you remain very true to the original with a symmetrical dial, which I think truly does capture the simple aesthetic this watch is trying to find. Other details which I think work extremely well are the very slim loom plots around the quadrants of the dial, and also that inset style of second track, which means that you have a great deal of the dial left clear of any markings, allowing for it to simply reflect light and act as an aesthetic object rather than anything else. The Dauphine hands in that golden colour also match the dial extremely well, and work very well with that very simple yet old-fashioned font on the dial, which does denote very simple details like automatic, the name of the watch, and of course Swiss down below, which is a very subtle detail which is very true to the original. In terms of other specifications on this watch, one has an ETA 2824 powering this 35mm dress watch, with the modification of having an instant date change, which is a modification which may seem quite simple and trivial, but nonetheless does show Longines' very clever and I think very well pointed attention to detail to produce a watch which appeals to really watch collectors, and those who simply like an attractive watch at the same time. Now, the next watch I'd like to talk about is from Seiko. And of course Seiko are known for their Grand Seiko Snowflake, which is an incredible dial in terms of the features and the unique nature of this dial. But due to its high popularity, and the fact that I feel that perhaps a more budget-friendly option would be in order, I'd like to talk about the Seiko Porcelain dial models. And these watches are fundamentally the same, I suppose, the same material as used in the 2016 models, but this year with redesigned dials and not in limited editions. And these were released just before Baselworld 2017, and feature a wonderfully elegant Seiko in-house made dials, which are porcelain, which is a material which is often not seen in terms of watch dials, because it requires firing and quite a lot of work to make to a high level. But once made is extremely resistant to moisture and also to sunlight, meaning it's fade resistant, which is why it was used in so many watches in the past. Now, the elegance of these dials comes in the way they're finished, in that one has different levels on the dials. This is most obvious on the multi-hand model with a power reserve and a pointer date. But certainly one has this wonderful curving of the dial, which is often not intentional, but in this case these dials are made very, very, very well. to give these wonderful, gentle curves to the dial, which I think frames things very, very well, while also complementing those fairly softly curved leaf-style hands very, very well. What's most rare about these watches, though, is the way in which these models are priced. And they're priced from effectively £1,000 to £2,400, depending on whether you go for the more simple three-hand models, or you go all the way to the chronograph models. That said, though, even for the multi-hand model with the power reserve and the pointer date, the watch still only comes to about £1,300, making it exceptional value for a dial of this nature, and of such elegance, and also rather large rarity in the watch world. Of course, one also has to consider that the price for a watch with these complications, in terms of a completely Swiss-made watch, would cost a great deal more. And also you're getting all these features in-house from Seiko, which is a remarkable package, I feel, especially for a watch with a dial of this elegance, and with a dial which is made with such care by a team of only 1,000 people, craftsmen working at Seiko, making these watches really the sort of watch which you won't see very often on the street. Now, the next watch which I'd like to talk about is from IWC. And I don't often talk about IWC models because quite often there are models which are less expensive, which offer similar features. For example, in terms of technical features, I feel that Zinn offer very similar features to IWC. That said, though, the dials on their blue Saint-Exupéry or Petit Prince models are sublime. They're extraordinarily well finished, and of course the expertise of IWC really shows in this instance. Of course, the Mark 18 is a watch which has become very iconic with the Mark series of IWCs being their more down-to-earth pilot's line, where the big pilot is no longer really a sort of a pilot's model. It's more of a sort of a luxury sports watch, even at this stage. I feel that the following of the Mark series has remained very, very true, and very much down to the original. And the strange thing is that people often feel that the Mark series is an inferior model to the Big Pilot. Though that said, they're very, very different watches, whereas the Big Pilot is based on the models, or at least in terms of its brainchild, is based on the models sold to the Luftwaffe during the Second World War, on these larger, more legible pilot's watches. The Mark series is based on those sold to the British Air Force. So one has this very different sort of philosophy behind these watches in terms of the needs of a pilot in the cockpit. However, the dial of this watch is what I'd like to talk about, and this is the edition for Le Petit Prince. And of course this is a book written by the very famous writer Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, one of my favourites in fact. But this blue dial produced in this edition is truly wonderful. It's this very rich sunburst dial which isn't any sort of electric blue, but nor is it dull or dark like a navy blue. It sits in between and changes colour very clearly with the light, and I must say is a real triumph of colour in this case. Of course, it's also a sunburst dial, so one does have this reflection and play off between the polished hands and this very elegant dial. The numerals are also very, very well considered, with that traditional pilot's mark at 12 o'clock, which I feel matches with the rest of the dial to give a very professional aesthetic to this somewhat a remarkable pilot's watch dial. Now, in terms of the specifications of the rest of the watch, this is very much a professional pilot's watch, in that it features admittedly a no-nonsense style of movement, an ETA, which is admittedly heavily modified and chronometer certified by IWC, but it's also heavily anti-magnetic with a soft iron core, and also is water resistant to 6 atmospheres, which doesn't seem like very much, but the really very impressive defining feature of this watch is more to do with the fact that it's negative pressure resistant, so one can have a sudden decompression of a cockpit and the crystal won't pop out, which is something seen on more and more pilots' watches, but certainly this is a real indication of a more professional piece. Now, the price for this 40mm timepiece with an automatic movement is £3,500, which does seem like quite a lot, but in terms of the heritage offered by this watch and the real quality of the product, I must say they do offer a fantastic piece. Now, the next watch which I'd like to talk about is one which I feel hasn't been talked about a great deal, and this is the Goodmaster Master Control 2017. And this is a watch which, remarkably for a watch with such elegant proportions and design, undercuts the normal Master Control line by about £1,000, and in its base three-hand in-house form comes in at £5,700. From then on, it does go up in price by several £1,000s for the various higher-end models, notably the chronograph and the geographic. But nonetheless, I feel is a wonderful watch in terms of its dial aesthetics, hence its inclusion in this video. Now, this is a 39mm watch, which is a truly wonderful size for a watch of this type. And in terms of detailing, I feel that Jaeger-LeCoultre have really hit a home run, if you will, with this watch. Now, the dial is very complex, yet is made out to look extremely simple. We have a very, very elegant, soft, somewhat matte finish to the silver dial in the centre, and then around the very rim. We have this beautifully brushed, very, very finely brushed section around the numerals and the segmented parts of the dial. This is matched extremely well with a blue date and blue details, which match the hands wonderfully, which follow this syringe format, but where the loom has been knocked out, or rather not applied in this case, which makes the watch reminiscent of vintage watches where the loom has fallen out of the hands, but allows one to have all the better view of the dial, and also of the automatic and Jaeger-LeCoultre details on that wonderful dial. Although that said, these hands come in more handy when looking at the model of this watch, which is of course the geographic or the chronograph. Now, I feel that what makes this dial work so well is the fact that this blue and black format, with the silver included, matches both the case and the strap extraordinarily well to make a very cleanly unified timepiece, which looks excellent compared to other watches of this price. Now, it's in the geographic, really, that one has this fantastic use of this dial, where one retains the segmented dial, but at different levels, notably lower down in the dial, one has this window for the world time function on that smaller second sub-dial with the second time zone, and also for that wonderfully placed day-night indicator to allow you a better understanding of where you are in the world. Of course, here those open hands really do serve a purpose, so one can easily read the smaller dial without any trouble, despite the fact the hands are covering it. Of course, the fact that the separate parts of this segmented dial are so well separated also means that the watch is extremely legible, also on the chronograph version, by separating the seconds and the minutes from the hours in a very clear way, which the eye can clearly see, but allows the watch to remain extremely elegant while doing so, which is why I feel this dial is such a beautifully finished and cleverly designed piece. Now, I feel a video like this simply wouldn't be complete without mention of the Rolex Deep Sea Sea Dweller D Blue. And of course, this is a watch which has been talked about a great deal, so I shan't talk about it in too much depth, apart from the fact that it is a 3900 metre diver at 44mm in diameter is quite a remarkable watch in terms of technology going into this watch. But it's really that dial I'd like to talk about, because this dial is really the only watch, or at least the only dial, and is indeed the first too, from Rolex which actually commemorates an event. Now, normally dials on Rolexes are very much specific to the model and don't vary, other than for example, particular commemorations of Rolex models. However, in this case, we have a dial which is very much aimed squarely at commemorating an event, which was James Cameron's dive to the bottom of Challenger Deep, which is the deepest part of the world's oceans. And so, as a result, a particular watch was designed for this. Not this particular watch, but the Deep Sea Challenge, which is the deepest diving watch ever made. And the dial of this watch is a true wonder, I feel, in terms of design, because we have this fading from blue to black, with green, a green font for the word deep sea, which is the same colour as the submersible used, which shows the dive down to this depth, which I must say is a superb idea and a real wonder of design, in this case from Rolex. Of course, these watches are very large at 44mm and very, very thick as well. So as a result, they're really not for everyone. For example, I would not be able to wear one of these watches due to its sheer size. But I must say, for a truly very impressive dial, Rolex really have hit the nail on the head here. Of course, this watch is very much an expensive timepiece, around the £10,000 mark, and I must say, I couldn't afford this sort of money. But I must say it still is a remarkable piece, despite the fact that it is a costly piece. in terms of design, and I suspect this watch will become quite a classic in future, due to its history and the events which brought it into being. Now, the final watch and its dial which I'd like to talk about is the Breguet 7727. And this is a watch which gained a great deal of attention due to the details in terms of the movement of this watch, but I must say, in addition to this, it has one of the most beautifully finished dials I think I've ever seen, in the watch world, certainly. And this is, of course, a 10 Hz watch, so it runs at 72,000 beats per hour, or semi-oscillations per hour, however you'd prefer to put it. But of course, what's impressive about this is that a regular timepiece runs, even a high-beat timepiece runs at a maximum of 36,000 vibrations per hour, resulting in a watch here which is really twice as smooth in terms of its frequency of beat. And this allows the watch to have these second indicators, if you will. So notably, at 12 o'clock, one has a sub-second dial, but also at about 2:30 on that dial as well, one has a smaller dial which rotates twice every 4 seconds. So that's effectively once every 2 seconds. One also has a power reserve indicator since it is a manually wound watch. But equally, one of the other wonderful features of this watch is the fact that the movement has bearings which are magnetic. So that's to say that for example, the balance wheel is held in place by magnetic fields, which means that if the watch is dropped or knocked, the wheel will return exactly to its original position because it's not held in by fixed bearings, but rather by a magnetic field. Now, the dial of this watch is a magnificent demonstration of machined areas, brushed areas with guilloche and various other patterns, which build this very ornate tapestry of metal in this wonderful silver guise, which I think contrasts the blue hands very, very well, and works, I feel, for both the white gold and the yellow and red gold style, which creates a watch of a really wonderful aesthetic, which I feel suits really most Breguet enthusiasts' interests anyway. Also, when one looks at the Breguet lineup, often one finds that their watches are primarily semi-skeletonized dials, at least on the models that one often sees. So it's very refreshing to see one of the flagship Breguet models with such an ornate, fully enclosed dial, which does show that their craftsmanship really isn't dropping in any way, or in any foreseeable way for the future. Anyway, I shall conclude this video here, but thank you very much for watching, and please do like, share and subscribe if you did enjoy the video and would like to see more content on the channel. So thank you very much for watching. This is I'm on the Watch Guy, over and out.